Hey, good afternoon. So we have come to a conclusion of our 16 fundamentals. Last night, Pastor concluded on end times and several things of that. The millennial reign of Christ. I was saying the middle one. The great white
final
throne judgment, right?
Yeah.
And then a new heaven and a new earth.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, there's so much there. You even said last night, if we were to do end times, I mean, that could go on for weeks and weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Probably even longer. There's so much to it. But that wasn't what last night was about, not breaking everything down. But there was a lot of information last night.
Yeah, but, a study of eschatology, that would be very lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we did the book of Revelation, which we will at some
absolutely.
point, goes into a lot more detail. The one thing that I mentioned over and over, I really repeatedly last night, was when you study the end times, there's a lot that we don't know.
Right.
And so some of what we would even teach is speculation.
Mm-hmm.
It could mean this, it could mean that. But at least with the Assemblies of God, we have 16 fundamental truths, and the last several deal with the end times,
Right.
eschatology, and of course, again, last night we went into the millennial reign of Christ. The millennium is 1,000 years, and so that clearly means that Jesus sets up his rule here on earth for 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
Satan is locked up for a period of time, and then at the end of 1,000 years of peace, he's released. And then that leads into the final judgment. And then the final events of Satan, the beast, the false prophet, hell and death are all thrown into the
Right.
lake of fire. I mean, that is the end.
Right.
And you can read that right in Scripture. I mean, it's right there, word for word, verse by verse. So there's no speculation on those things.
Right.
And I also want to talk about, when you talk about end times, it all begins, and this is where I'm so glad for the soundness of doctrine that the Assemblies of God has. It begins with the pre-tribulation rapture of the saints.
Right.
And I know in some churches there's controversy. Well, why should we escape tribulation? Other people are going through hard times right now in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said that one week, what the Bible calls, or what we refer to as a great tribulation, is not tribulation. It's not anything the enemy does. It isn't anything that mankind does.
Mm-hmm.
But it actually is the wrath of God being poured out.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we believe that Christians are taken out of here before the wrath of God hits this earth is because of a verse in Thessalonians that says that the saints of God will not suffer wrath.
Mm-hmm.
We will not suffer the wrath of God. We've been saved.
Right.
It's by His grace.
Right. No, we talked a lot about what happens at death, for the believer, for the non-believer, and I think something that really struck me that, as we talked about a little bit, is bad enough that it's separation from God for the non-believer, but it literally is torment.
Yeah.
It's not, and that's why in these last days, or however we view it, people need to know about Jesus. You talked a little bit about your father last night and how you didn't give up.
Yeah.
You didn't give up, and thankfully he accepted the Lord. But something else too that, and again, if we were going to go too much into it, but you talked about John and writing Revelation, and he's describing as he's seen
What he sees. Yeah.
And how did you describe something you've never seen before? And that's why we get so much imagery that we try to make sense of it, and we really can't. We didn't know what John was seeing.
I want to go back to something you just talked about.
Okay.
Now, it's like, again, for the human soul, the human spirit, it doesn't cease to exist.
Right.
Okay, for the believer, it's eternity with Christ, and it's heaven.
Mm-hmm.
For the non-believer, it's torment
Right.
in hell. And I know that we don't want to think about that even as Christians, that lost loved ones are going to be tormented forever. But it is reality. If you read Scripture, it's reality. You read it in the Gospels, not just in the book of Revelation. And I think a lot of Christians today, we want to think that, well, if a loved one dies without Christ, they're going to simply just go into some kind of nirvana. And maybe just, there's a theological term called annihilation theory, where you just simply cease to exist. And that is not what Scripture teaches. So there's a real urgency. I want to encourage you, if you have loved ones that don't know Christ, there ought to be an urgency in our hearts to get them saved. And we can't make them get saved,
Mhm.
but let's make sure they know how to get saved.
Yeah.
That's the key.
I think that we look at it and we want to say, well, they were a good person and all of
Mhm.
these things. You know, the Bible is clear, and we hope and pray for our loved ones, our friends, and unsaved people around the world.
Yeah.
Because what was the term you kept using last night? Lost.
Lost, yeah.
Truly lost.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a great series that very deep. I mean, again, you could probably break it down even more so. But
Each one of those lessons
yeah,
could have
for
been
sure,
a number of weeks
for
each.
sure. But I look forward to
Yeah.
when you will do that in the future.
But anyways, we're going to start a new series this coming Wednesday, April 6th, in the chapel at 7 o'clock. Want to make sure you're there. It's by Andy Stanley, and it's entitled "When God," with a question mark. And really interesting series, 4 weeks, and I hope you'll be out. And remember too, we have something for everyone of every age here at Praise Assembly. So hope to see you next Wednesday night.
Hey, should we ask Pastor Hans what he thinks?
He's been pretty quiet, hasn't he?
He has.
I guess we like him like that. Anyways, have a good week.